Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Walker. I'm the Director of Communications for the City of Missouri City. We are very grateful for you all to attend our Animal Services News Conference today. Have a lot of exciting updates to share with you, and we'll be happy to take your questions afterward as well. At 3 o'clock, we're going to try to be respectful of your time and wrap up. But if you have any follow-up questions after that, I'll be available to assist you. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Mayor Alan Owen, who's going to provide some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy, and good afternoon to everyone. And thank you all for taking the time to come this afternoon. First of all, I know it's a busy afternoon, and we're going to try to make sure that we live up to Stacy's time frame. The city manager has called this press conference so that we can provide a final update on our month-long review of our Animal Services Division and to present the animal shelter's new standard operating procedures that we've been working on. As most of you know, I own pets. Matter of fact, my entire family has shelter rescued pets, so I'm well aware of the importance of that process today, and I'm proud of the fact that we have taken those pets and have them in our homes. Last year, city staff identified several areas of improvement needed in our shelter, which we shared with our residents, our stakeholders, and the media via a series of frequently asked question articles that, under the direction of the city manager, Anthony Snipes, city staff began a comprehensive review of the shelter operations and actually began crafting the new standard operating procedures to clearly define the goals and the missions of the shelter. Our final SOPs have been provided to you, and I think you have them at the back. The Missouri City Council's commitment to our pet population is evidenced by the construction of the current facility that we have today. That our facility was built in 2012 at the cost of $734,000. And our current staffing support is there to help us with that. I want the citizens of Missouri City to know that this council has supported our city staff with the resources to continue to ensure the health, the safety, and the well-being of any animals that are in our care. As recent as this past Monday night, this council, and let me introduce Councilman Boney and Councilman Emery, who are here today with me, we shared with you a mission statement, and Monday night we adopted that statement. And you're going to hear more about that later on. Although we're not perfect, we're committed to work towards excellence and doing good for our citizens and animals of our community, and I can assure you that we do care. I know that many of you here probably have read different articles, but I want you to know that we do care about what happens with the animals, not only in our care, but in our citizens' care. So I now want to introduce our city manager, Anthony Snipes, who can facilitate the remainder of today's news conference and kind of bring you up to date on our standard and operating procedures. Anthony?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Owen. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Snipes, and I have served this great city as city manager since December of 2015. And as stated by the mayor earlier, we're here to share with you Missouri City's path forward regarding the future of animal shelter operations. Since I was noticed about concerns regarding the animal shelter around December of 2017, my team and I worked swiftly by partnering with outside agencies, volunteers, staff, and regional partners to undertake a review that my hope is will culminate today. I would like to reiterate that our efforts during the past 3 months have been aimed at ensuring that the animals in our care are safe. A number of agencies that have regulatory jurisdiction versus criminal jurisdiction were brought in to assist us educationally with our procedures, processing, and the handling of drugs. Specifically, the Texas Health and Human Services Agency supported our efforts by educating us regarding laws pertaining to drugs only, such as chapters 431, 483, and 481 of the Health and Safety Code. They went into detail with my staff on the specifics of the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, the Dangerous Drug Act, and the Controlled Substance Act. the Texas State Board of Veterinarian Medicine medical examiners, who oversees the practice of veterinary medicine, including diagnosis and treatment of animals, was brought in, as well as lastly, the Drug Enforcement Administration was on site in a knowledge-based capacity to answer any questions that staff may have had about federal statutes as they relate to animal services operations. City staff, under the leadership of Mr. Kumar, visited area shelters to engage neighboring agencies on their own policies and procedures. I then instructed staff to install shelter cameras to ensure safety of all in the shelter, as well as installing new shelter software. Employees have begun using that software for some basic data entry tasks, and they will be trained in the future on its full utilization as we move into the future. In the interim, we relocated team members to the shelter's front desk so that the shelter's doors may be open during regular business hours, Monday through Saturday. This will be fully implemented with the hiring of our new animal shelter manager. Speaking of that manager, we are currently in the process of hiring this team member whose oversight duties will include protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the animal population under the shelter's care, enforcing rules, policies, and procedures according to best practices to provide humane care of animals, managing adoption of our pet population, and directing the work of shelter employees and our volunteers. We also began to coordinate new social media outreach initiatives to advertise both adoptable pets of the week and assist those who needed reuniting with their owners. We performed a review of shelter rates, which coincidentally was approved by our council on this past Monday. And we also created an updated Animal Services Division mission statement, which City Council also approved at Monday's City Council meeting. The new mission statement, which I think our staff, as well as with input from key partners and volunteers, is as follows. Missouri City Animal Services is committed to protecting the health, safety, and well-being of all people and animals in our community through enforcement of state and local laws and by providing compassionate care for every animal within the city's animal shelter. We will accomplish that mission by assuring that all proper medications have been administered, providing for the registration of all dogs and cats within the city, providing temporary housing and humane care and treatment for all shelter animals, assisting in reuniting lost pets with their owners, responding effectively and efficiently to all animal bite cases, providing spay and neuter and testing services to reduce pet overpopulation and heartworm testing prior to adoption, and creating collaborative partnerships and training with outside agencies, rescue groups, our volunteers to promote adoptions and also to reduce euthanasia rates. Last night we had a great session, our second annual Municipal Volunteer Program Input Forum. Our staff also introduced the new policy manual to residents as well as city volunteers that I approved recently. This new volunteer program policy was completed in partnership with city staff as well as outside counsel. Staff launched an update of the policy guidelines as part of this year's fiscal business plan goals in anticipation of continued growth of the volunteer program. As part of this process, volunteers are now required to go through an annual reapplication process and will now have a designated volunteer liaison to whom they will report. I end by saying we value partnerships, and we value our private and public partnerships, including our relationship with our municipal volunteer program. All city programs, however, falls under the supervision and direction of city staff. And so moving forward, the volunteer program policy guidelines and animal services standard operating procedures will clearly define the role for both the city staff members and volunteers. I would say to you that, as the mayor said earlier, we do care. And council's previous commitment with the investment of the shelter and the commitment that they're putting forth today and moving forward is evidence of our sincere caring of the animals in our care. At this time, I'm going to ask Sashi Kumar, if he would, to give you a little more detail regarding our new standard operating procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Snipes. Good afternoon. My name is Shashi Kumar, Director of Public Works. I'm going to give you a little overview on the standard operating procedures. When the city manager and the city council laid out a vision to make several enhancements to the animal shelter, one of the enhancements we were looking for was creating a standard operating procedures manual. So what is a standard operating procedures manual? There are several tasks that occur in the animal shelter. There are several tasks that take place on a daily basis. There are a number of resource requirements. If this standard operating procedure lays out what those tasks are, what those resources are, how many times they occur on a daily basis. Now, why do we need this? We want to ensure consistency and predictability. Also, we want to set up a baseline that staff as well as volunteers can follow when implementing the routine tasks as well as the non-routine tasks in the animal shelter. And that's why we established the standard operating procedures manual. We did so by benchmarking with a number of cities. We looked into their practices, the best management practices. Me and a number of my staff personally visited a number of shelters in this region. We asked them what are the best practices that we follow. We also took into consideration the feedback given by the review agencies that the city manager mentioned in his speech. We also took into consideration the input given by the Animal Control Advisory Board that the city has, as well as the listening sessions we had with the volunteers. So all these were taken into account in coming up with the standard operating procedures manual. The city manager or the mayor mentioned that it's available. I believe our communications team is trying to work to get that out to you all within the next day or two, and it should be made available even on our websites. So what I'm just going to highlight the main synopsis of the standard operating procedures manual. One, it defines the roles and responsibility for the staff. What does the staff need to do on a daily basis? What on a non-routine basis? For example, if there is an injured stray dog that's turned into the facility, what is it that the staff need to do, both from a legal perspective as well as being from a compassionate perspective? The second thing is about the volunteers. What are the roles and responsibilities of the volunteers? What tasks can the volunteers do? You're trying to streamline a number of operations. For example, we do have a number of volunteers assisting us in the daily tasks. We want to set specific times, have a sign-up procedure so there is no overlapping volunteers on any particular slot. So these are some of the streamlining activities that we have identified in the standard operating procedures manual. Also, in line with the new mission statement that the mayor talked about, we are enhancing the level of care, and we are providing some kind of basic services such as spaying, neutering, the basic vaccination so as to promote adoptions and keep the euthanasia rate low. So we have included a package or some kind of an adoption package in the SOP that needs to occur for any animal that is made to be ready for adoption purposes. So these are things again identified in the standard operating procedures manual. Again, the whole purpose of the standard operating procedures manual is to enhance the level of care, provide compassionate treatment for animals, while doing so adhering to the local laws as well as the laws of the state. We believe this is one of the tools, one of the enhancements that we're making for the shelter, and this will enable us to take the shelter in a positive direction. Thank you so much.
At this time, we're going to open the press conference up to questions, but before we do, I want to take this time to introduce the staff that are behind me. To my immediate right is Scott Elmer, who's the Assistant City Manager over infrastructure and also over the shelter. Chief Mike Beresin, the police chief for our police department. The council members were introduced. And then Ijo Siyamu, who is our city attorney. So we'll be open for any questions that the media and others may have.
What was the outcome of the investigation into the medication that the volunteers had donated and it was confiscated? What's the outcome of that, Chief Delich?
I can answer. There was no investigation involving the medication that was turned over to the police department for safekeeping. It was discovered by the city staff. So there was no criminal investigation associated with this internal review.
But at one point, you all were having the DEA look at it, and there was talk that there was illegal substances that were found with the medication.
Yeah, I don't think any of those statements came from any city staff that there was illegal substances. There was substances that are required to have a prescription to possess or acquire that were discovered by city staff and turned over to the police department for safekeeping.
What were those medications?
We have a list of them. I do not know if I'm authorized to release that list, but you can simply file an open records request for our accreditation standards at the police department and obtain that.
Is the investigation done?
There is.
Well, you said there's no investigation.
Yeah, as Sashi Kumar, the Director of Public Works, just stated that the review is complete, that they've implemented the standard operating procedures and they're moving forward in a positive direction.
Okay, but back in December, these medications that were donated to the shelter were confiscated. And then at that point, Stacy or someone said there's an investigation, and then it came out that that the DEA was looking into it, that there were illegal drugs that were found. I mean, that's not an investigation.
First of all, drugs were not confiscated. If drugs are or if any property is inside a city facility and city employees take possession of property that's already inside a city facility, you can't confiscate what's already inside your city facility. But you gotta let me finish there, please. If those drugs or any other items aren't supposed to be there, and we have the capacity in the police department to secure those properly, then we'll secure those properly. But there was no confiscation. Confiscation would mean that we've started an investigation. As stated earlier by Mr. Snipes in his opening statements, the DEA was on hand to help us with any questions we might have had. And if they've opened an investigation, they certainly haven't told us.
What's happened to the medication? Do you all still have it, or did you give it back to the volunteers?
No, I stated to you before, we still have any of the medications that required a prescription to obtain. Those are still safely secured at the police department.
What about, were there medications that did not require a
You
prescription?
betcha, yes. And all of those, to answer your question earlier, they were all returned back to the animal shelter. All the over-the-counter medications that anybody can walk into CVS or Walgreens or whatever to acquire, those were all sorted through, removed from the medications that required a prescription, and those were returned back to the animal control shelter.
So the shelter is able to use that medication again?
I'm assuming so, it's in their possession. Thank you. Good questions.
Some of the over-the-counter medications that came from the volunteers were handed back to them. Moving forward, what we have implemented is all medications are being administered by city's staff, which is the ACOs trained to administer those medications, or by a city's veterinarian. We are not allowing any other entities, including volunteers, to administer those medicines to the animals. That is one of the protocols that we have also incorporated within the SOPs based on the feedback that we have received.
You had an issue, I guess back in January with heartworm testing. You weren't able to test, heartworm test all the dogs. Where are you all on that?
That's an excellent question, and based on our benchmarking and consultation with the veterinarian that we benchmark with, that is a testing that's something need to be done by a qualified staff, being a vet tech or a veterinarian. So moving forward, we are doing the heartworm testing prior to any adoptions. Any animal that is tested positive for heartworm is not going for adoption. But that testing is being done by a veterinarian. As the city manager alluded to, we have issued an RFP, a request for proposal for a contracted veterinarian. Once we have that vet on board, he or she is going to visit the facility and do the required testing. Whatever treatment can be done within the facility will be done in-house. If it can't be done here, it will be taken to the veterinarian and have those testings done.
Any other questions?
Where are you-
Kumar, sir? If we
I'm
can-
sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Go ahead.
What are new in the standard operating procedures and voluntary certification? What was not there before that you have introduced?
Differentiate.
Although we had informally doing the tasks that we do for the animal shelter, we did not have a formally adopted standard operating procedures. If you were to benchmark across the region, not many shelters do have. And for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, now we have a formal standard operating procedure.
Our volunteers? the annual certification? Is it something new or?
The MVP program was something that was initiated back in 2014. So what we have done in light of all the volunteer activities across the city, and this is more so appropriate for our communications staff, we have re-evaluated and we issued an annual recertification program for the municipal volunteer program, and that was introduced yesterday as we speak.
Kumar, integral in the development of that, our city attorney, as well as our outside counsel, were instrumental in helping us craft that. So I'm going to ask E. Joyce if she would to give some more details related to that.
Sure, and essentially what we've done is we have specified and set forth defined expectations for volunteers as well as staff members who work with volunteers. So the recertification process would simply entail staff going through the background and essentially the application process of volunteers to make sure that they're still qualified to volunteer for the city's program. One example I gave last night was, for example, there might be a person who's volunteering with our Parks Department who within the course of the year gets some sort of conviction, criminal conviction, that disqualifies the individual from volunteering. During that annual process, staff will determine or review and then determine whether folks are still qualified to volunteer in the
So
positions
this
of
applies to all volunteers, not only the.
Correct,
Yes.
correct.
Also, what about the existing volunteers? Are you going to reappoint them, review them, or?
Certainly, staff plans on reviewing, staff has a new application process for all volunteers. So existing volunteers will have to complete that new application before March 31st of this year.
How's the rates changing? How will that affect the shelter?
The vast majority of the rates remain the same. The difference is our adoption rates. In review of our benchmark cities around the region, we found that our rates were very, very low. So I think the rate now is from $15 and it moved up to $85. If you look at some of the regional costs, it goes as high as $115. But we believe that that puts us in the middle, and it's a benchmark rate that we believe is appropriate and something that is consistent with the region rates.
Does the shelter still rent a?
We have one more here.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, going back to the medication question, do you guys know how long those medications were stored at the shelter? And did you have conversations with volunteers as to why they were storing the medications at the shelter? They were personal prescriptions?
The city staff and management were made aware of these medications somewhere in December. As soon as we came to know about the medications, we took the action. I'm not personally aware of when these medications were, but this is when we were made aware of, and that's when we acted and took proactive measures. What was your next question?
That was it.
Thank you.
I just think it's important to note that from our standpoint, based on what we know now, in our consultation with the state agencies, we want to make sure whatever our go-forth is, that the handling of the drugs on site, whether that's over-the-counter or any other type of medication, is appropriately handled and administered by the certified folks that we talked about earlier.
So that wasn't happening before?
At this point, sir, there were a number of administrations that occurred. Some volunteers administered, we talked about the over-the-counter, and our staff with the more serious medications would apply those. But what we found over the last 3 months is there are some things that we needed to do, and that's one of the reasons we have new policies and procedures to give us clear guidance on how things will be done going forward.
But like over-the-counter kind of stuff, you know, like medicine anybody could go get like at a feed store, you know, like for heartworm, that sort of thing. Can volunteers get that medication?
We're not supporting that. One of the things, there's so many things, you never know the conditions of any animal coming in. So we're, from a safe haven standpoint, we're looking at having a person who's certified in veterinarian medicine or has the appropriate certifications to administer those at this time.
So then do you have a vet that like comes periodically to the shelter, or how do you do that?
I think, as shared by Mr. Kumar earlier, we have currently an RFP out on the street for veterinarian services, RFP. And our hope is that once that veterinarian is in place, they will be coming into the shelter to administer any needs that we have for the application of medications.
So now until you get that, you like have to take every dog to see a vet?
Where at this point, that's what's occurring. And as I stated, we're at a point where whatever it takes to make sure that our animals are safe and that we have the appropriate tests and medications applied, that's what we're doing now.
Is that getting kind of expensive, to take them each one to a vet?
It's a cost of doing business, and at this point, as I stated, and this council's commitment is until we get the appropriate processes in place, the appropriate staff, i.e. the animal shelter manager, as well as the contract for the veterinarian affairs, our veterinarian service, we're going to do what we need to do to make sure that our animals are safe.
Do you know when you'll have a shelter manager? Do you have like a time frame on that?
It's out on the streets right now. I can say to you that typically an interview for a managerial position can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 9 weeks. We do not want to rush this. We want to make sure that the person that we bring to be a part of our HPO team is the right person and the right fit, not only for us, but for the community.
Do you all still rent space like the Stafford? At one time, I think you all had, like Stafford would bring animals to your all's shelter?
We do, and I'll have Sasha to give you the details of that relationship with the shelter for Stafford animals.
Thank you. When the shelter was expanded, I believe back in 2012, there was an interlocal agreement that was entered between City of Missouri City and Stafford. As part of that agreement, they lease some shelter space, and approximately that's equates to about 6 kennel space, and that is the interlocal agreement that's currently in place.
Now, we've heard that there was a dog that was brought from Stafford that maybe a couple of weeks ago that had distemper and died. Did that create a problem for you all, for the animals that you had in the shelter at the time?
I'm not aware of any problem that created for our kennel population, but that is something that we are planning on addressing with Stafford moving forward. While we implement these SOPs in our shelter, they do lease our kennel space. So it makes sense for us to implement this across the board. And this is, we are trying to work with Stafford to make sure that they are on board with the new SOPs. And as we move forward with this interlocal agreement, we will be addressing these issues with Stafford as well.
Because there's some concern that like Stafford, that the animals that come from Stafford, maybe they're not up to speed on vaccinations and all that. And then, whenever you bring in a dog, no matter what you all are doing, you bring in these dogs from a different entity. And if you're not aware of their status, in a way, that could kind of mess up what you all are trying to do, right?
Let me just say this. We've had a long-standing relationship with the city of Stafford. Our mayor and the mayor of Stafford have a good collaborative working relationship. As this partnership continues, as Sashi stated earlier, we will be meeting with Stafford. Every year we should have conversations with them on what's going on at the shelter and what the partnership needs to be. And as he stated earlier, our intentions are to have conversations, and that may mean an enhanced level, with us having an enhanced level of care for our animals and their commitment to animals, as the mayor of Stafford has stated, he's committed as well. We'll see what the future holds. I would like to just say before I go to Kumar that as the mayor stated earlier, we're not perfect. It's easy for folks to find fault in things that we may do, but as I stated, we have a heart for the betterment and the care of these animals. And what we're saying to the community, work with us, not against us, so that we can move forward and have the best shelter in the region, in the Missouri City Shelter. Kumar.
From what I understand now, you have new procedures in place and medicines to be administered after consulting a veterinarian and so on. So in the past, you didn't have such system. Volunteers could administer medicine on their own, and there were no beds available of that condition.
In the past, some of the over-the-counter medications, I'll just throw you an example, such as flea treatment, were being done by the volunteers. Now, as part of these enhancements, we looked at best management practices, got feedback from these review agencies, talked to the vet, and what they advised us to follow the protocol, which is what we're doing. Moving forward, our ACOs will do the basic administration, such as over-the-counter medications. Anything that needs a vet care, in the interim, we are taking it to a vet and having it administered to be more efficient. Once we have the contract in place, that vet will come to the center on a routine basis and we'll do those tasks. And again, we want to move forward in a positive direction, and these are the positive enhancements.
What happened with the investigation of the dog that was injured? Thanks. What happened with the investigation with the dog that was injured in January, but didn't get treatment? He had microchips and he had ID, but he was not treated.
I can address that. You're probably referencing the dog. When this happened was when during the time that we had the very big winter freeze. Our staff resources were kind of limited. We were not able to timely take it to the veterinarian, because our policy is within the 72-hour period, which is the 3 days old. Technically, the city does not have jurisdiction over the animal. In the interim, we try to find the owner and try to locate the pet with the owner. But after that, it becomes the city's animal that we try to take care and try to see if we can find a home, try to provide medical care and things like that. Now, this particular case that probably what you're referring was within the 72-hour period. So our resources were kind of limited during that period. But again, moving forward, we have put in mechanisms in place where that should not happen. We have protocols of when a dog is found, what is the timeline limit to contact the owner, what is the methodology that they need to contact the owner, and in the event, if we find an animal within the stray hold period, what we call the 3 days or 72 hours, if it needs medical attention, what is the protocol that we need to take? Again, those are identified in the standard operating procedures.
And I think it's important to note that during the 72-hour hold, those animals are not the city's. We do not own the animals. They are still under the ownership of that owner. So in essence, we have to be very, very careful as it relates to any application of certain medication, because ultimately, if that conflicts with some medication that they're already on, and if something happens to the dog or cat in our care, then that puts the city to be liable. So at this point, the first 72 hours are still the ownership of that owner.
So they had the name and the idea, or if you look at the identity of the dog, but nothing was done during that 3-day period while the dog was sick. So how will that change? What is your timeline now?
We still have the 72 hours, and I think if the appropriate identification is there, the owners will be contacted and share with them that we have their dog in our care.
Repercussions from that? Did something get fired?
We had a review that has not concluded yet. There's still some information that is being there, but it was reviewed internally, and at this point, the persons that had some level of accountability have been counseled accordingly.
How many volunteers do you need to run this? Well,
As many as willing.
what's the minimum?
There's not a minimum or maximum. Of course, the only challenge we would have is the capacity of the facility. From our standpoint, based on the new policies and procedures, we will determine the needs, and then based on the needs, we will apply the necessary need for volunteers at that point. So in essence, the new shelter manager will coordinate the scheduling of the volunteers and be able to apply the staffing appropriately as needed.
What kind of, there were talk that you all had basically demonized the volunteers. Can you address that?
I thought I was the nicest city manager in the region, let alone the state. So from my standpoint, I don't know about demonization, but what I do know about is that we value the partnership of our volunteers. From my standpoint, everything that I've done since December of 2017, and my record speaks for itself, has been focused on what we need to do to make our shelter the best that it can be. And by having the support of the agencies to come in and give us guidance, a session to educate us on the applicable laws, all of that has been done to make sure that our volunteers are protected, that our animals are safe, and that our city can move forward in a positive way that makes the shelter the envy of the region, and not necessarily the one that has the black eye. So from our standpoint, that's been my focus, and unfortunately, I know that's been put out there that we're trying to demonize the volunteers, but as the chief administrative officer of this organization, I can assure you that I have no ill will with any of our volunteers, because they're working with us to support us in our aims to be the best shelter that we can be.
Can you
Mr.
see
Mayor,
though
could
where
you
there
respond to
might
that
be,
as well?
I'm sorry.
Say, Mr. Mayor, could you respond to that as well, since there was talk that you and the other councilman was not here
As to what?
on demonizing the volunteers?
I didn't demonize anyone that I'm aware of. As I said, I have sheltered pets. My kids have sheltered pets. My entire family did. I just wanted to make sure that the city was doing what it needed to do to make sure that the animals in our shelter were being taken care of properly, legally. And when the city manager contacted me, I'm the one who asked that all the agencies that we needed to be brought in to make sure we were doing things right. We didn't demonize anyone.
Can you see though how there might be hard people that, some of the volunteers, I could see how they might feel upset or that they were treated badly. I mean, you've got these women who they're spending all this time trying to save these animals. They're buying medication, they're bringing in medication. I mean, they're doing all these things at a shelter that, I mean, let's face it, you euthanize, it's not a no-kill shelter. They're doing all these things, and then all of a sudden, it's like, we're taking your medication, and there was an appearance of an investigation where people were bringing in illegal drugs. So, yeah, these people kind of had a cloud of suspicion around them. I mean, can you see where they might have hurt feelings from all of this?
Sir, as you know, the media, there's been plenty of discussions about what happened, what did not happen. What I've stated, and I'll reiterate that today, I can't dwell on what has transpired in the past, but what I'm focused in on is where we go towards the future. You know, the bottom line is, I think the volunteers, one central point that we can agree on is that we care for the animals in our care, whether that's city staff, or whether that's partners, or whether that's volunteers. If we want to spend a large amount of our time focused in on what happened, people get feelings hurt all the time. But my focus isn't there. My focus is on the animals in our care. So, you know, if there are any feelings that were hurt, my apologies. But we're moving forward for the betterment of the animals.
How long do you think it'll take you to find a veterinarian for the shelter? I know that's a high priority for what you were saying. How long do you think that's your?
Because it is an RFP process, a lot of time that requires, we have to wait until the proposals come in. They will be evaluated by our internal staff. So it can be anywhere from a month or 2 months, but we're trying, understanding the urgency and the importance of this. We want to make sure we make the right decision, but an efficient and effective decision. So hopefully we may be able to get that concluded within the next month or two, or sooner. Any others? Yes, ma'am.
What do you estimate is the financial impact of these changes?
Based on a recent council meeting, I think the Public Works Department estimated about $250,000 more to provide the care that we're talking about. And one of the things, as I've stated to them, our 2018 budget will be a very difficult budget. But council has made that commitment, and at this point, that request will be included in the city manager's proposed budget going forward.
But you've passed a budget amendment for the new staffers and such?
We plan on doing another adjustment soon. Right now, we're absorbing that based on some personnel savings, but our intentions are in the near future to evaluate savings within the Public Works Department and to try to absorb some of that until we are able to finalize that in the 18-19 budget.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
I don't know about Stephen, I was thinking about in terms of there being kind of an adversarial relationship with the shelter volunteers. Do you have any ideas about how to go about building trust between the people who are volunteering in your shelter and your city staffers or your administration?
I think we've tried to do that, and I think if you've witnessed and looked at social media posts, and I get those daily, and comments and papers, etc. It's a large amount of information out there. From my standpoint, our credo in the city is together we excel. And together we excel is not just our city staff, but our partnership with others. So in order for us to go forth, everyone collectively, the volunteers, our other partners, we need to come together for the good of the community. So we've taken steps to make sure that they know. And for me, a $250,000 investment, and that's just for some of the medications and others, putting in cameras to make sure that we can monitor and ensure that nothing that's done incorrectly is not noticed and documented accordingly. Looking at software investments. So I think from a city of Missouri City standpoint, we've stepped up and we've shown that this is important to us, and I want to applaud our elected officials by being committed and supporting staff in their efforts to move forward.
You mentioned 250,000 as the additional expenditure that may be needed. What is the current allocation for the animal shelter?
I'll turn it over to Sashi Kumar, but I do know that the current allocation includes 2 ACOs, animal control officers, and the appropriate M&O expenses to support their work.
Our current year adopted budget is about $220,000, which includes 3 staff level positions, 3 full-time staff level positions.
Any other questions? Well, we want to thank everyone today. Our purpose for today was to provide you an update on what we've done. We've tried to be as transparent during the course of the last 3 months. I know some people may question that, but in the end, we wanted this to culminate today by sharing with you our go forth and our next steps. We're very happy with the standard operating procedures, the new MVP guidelines, and more importantly, council support in our efforts to enhance the service and care of the animals at the Missouri City Animal Shelter. So thank you for your partnership, and we look forward to bigger and better things in Missouri City.
Thank you.